Tony Vitello and the Tennessee Volunteers are headed back to Omaha in the College World Series after taking down Evansville in the Super Regionals at Lindsey Nelson Stadium. Here to help us break it all down, our good friend, once again, he joins the show, Eric Cain of Volquest.com of the On3 Network and host of Locked on Vols, one of the best on the business when it comes to talking all things Tennessee. Eric, what's going on, my man? Appreciate you taking the time.
Hey man, thanks so much, dude. It's been a wild ride covering the Vols this year, and I'm fortunate that Volquest has allowed me to go cover the College World Series again. So stoked for this week ahead.
Eric, before we look ahead to Omaha, let's look back first at how they got there. The Super Regionals against Evansville, and I think the final result was as we all expected. Maybe how it happened wasn't, with Evansville winning Game 2, and I think you even mentioned this last week when we had you on that. You know, this is a beaten, battered, and bruised Tennessee fan base that has seen the Vols get to these moments where they stub their toe on the biggest stage. I know there was probably some anxious feelings going into that game on Sunday night, but the bottom line, Tennessee punches their ticket to Omaha. Your thoughts on the way the Super played out and what you took away from Tennessee's Super Regional victory over Evansville?
Yeah, man. I mean, first and foremost, as a Tennessee fan, if I'm following this team and watching this team, I am just rejoicing that you don't have to see Evansville again. I mean, that team is good, man. I mean, they're 11 seniors. About half of those seniors, about 5 or 6 of those seniors are super seniors. They can hit. Their top flight pitchers are good. They don't have enough of them, but they are good. That coach, Wes Carroll, did a great job. That fan base they were loud. They traveled. I mean, it was what postseason baseball is all about, and it was one of the greatest. It's what you love about college athletics, right? I mean, that weekend kind of summarizes it all. So really great season for Evansville. They were so good. But I think I even said it when we were talking last week. You know, if Evansville gets a game, for one of the first 2 games and forces that Game 3, like, you still got to come back to the yard and play the next day. And that's where the difference is. Tennessee we know about Tennessee, best lineup in the country, top 3 pitching staff in the country. We know about all the bats and the weapons Tennessee has. And you still got to come back and play the next game. And of course, Game 3, you saw Tennessee run away with it. So, it was a really, really good series. Xander Seacrest was phenomenal. Him and A.J. Causey have been Tennessee's best pitchers in the last month for sure. A postseason single-game record for Tennessee, 7 home runs in that Game 3. Incredible. Christian Moore just continues to be the best player in the country, and it was just fun. A lot of offense, good pitching at times, and it was the result that we all expected, but it wasn't going to be super easy. I mean, you don't get to that point by accident. Evansville, that lineup with McGinnis killed Tennessee all weekend. Schallenberger, Forgarosi, whatever his name is, Simon Sherry was pretty quiet, but he's a really, really good player. Ty Rumsey, running on the wall out there, making catches. I mean, they're a really good team, but the result is what we expected, and Tennessee got the win and back in Omaha for the 3rd time in 4 years.
Eric, I want to go to after Game 3, so off the field, and we talk a lot about Tony Vitello and the job he's done in Knoxville. I thought that post-game press conference clip, that 6-minute or so clip where he – we were seeing posts about, man, Tony Vitello is really fiery in the post game right now. And then we see the video. My big takeaway from that was how, you can feel how you want to feel. Some people are going to hate Tony Vitello. That's totally fine. Tennessee fans love him, and some other folks are going to as well. I tend to fall in that category, and I don't know how you wouldn't want to play for that guy. Like, what was your takeaway? Again, this is a guy you cover day in, day out. Tony Vitello is a fiery sort, if you will, but what did you take away from that 6-minute or so rant he went on after Game 3?
We do this thing on over at Volquest called the Monday Night Chat, and we do it every Monday night at 10 o'clock, and we answer questions for an hour. And somebody asked me kind of like, when you were sitting there, what was going through your mind? And so I was like, well, at first I'm sitting there, I'm like, okay, all right, okay, he's fiery, cool. And then I look down, it's like, oh, 3 minutes, okay. Like, how much longer is he gonna go here? And then I was like, man, I gotta transcribe this. Can you shut up, please? Like, calm down. I was like, God. And then like I'm sitting there trying not to laugh because he's talking about Noah Webster being a Patriot, and then he says, I don't know the guy. Of course you don't know the guy, Tony. He died in the 1800s. So we're all sitting over laughing. Xander Seacrest, the pitcher up there, is laughing beside him. The moderator to Tony's right is trying so hard not to laugh. And so we're laughing, and then Tony gets emotional, and he's talking about Cal Stark and his catcher, and I mean, it got real in a hurry. And so listen, Tony, he is Italian. He is passionate. He wears his heart on his sleeve. I think anybody that follows college baseball knows who Tony Vitello is, knows that. But, he will go to bat, no pun intended, for his guys. There was a reporter that asked the question after the heartbreaking loss in Game 2 where Tennessee trailed 10-5 entering the ninth and put across 3 runs, had the tying run at second base, and, you kind of lost in heartbreaking fashion. 10 minutes later, there was a question asked in the post-game press conference, like, hey, if you lose tomorrow and don't make it to Omaha, would you define this season as a success? And he answered the question, and he was fine. But it did not sit well with some of his players. And obviously they kind of talked about it, and Tony probably didn't sleep much that night for a number of reasons, but probably stewed on that, and he was just ready to go. And Tony's he's going to stick up for his guys. He is if you look in Noah Webster's dictionary, he should have said this, you will see Tony Vitello's name, but beside, coaches or players coach. He will go to the bat for those guys, and he loves those guys, and he's passionate. So that was my biggest takeaway. I mean, it's like he dropped a Mike Gundy saying, I don't want to drop a Mike Gundy because I don't want anybody to know how old I am, but I mean, get that at me, not my players. And so that was kind of my biggest takeaway. But he was excited for the win. He was proud of his team. He was proud of the fan base because that was the best game atmosphere I've ever covered in Tennessee. I mean, there's been a lot of good ones, but that was incredible baseball wise. And he was proud of the fan base, and he was just feeling a whole lot of emotions all at one time. And he just kind of let it out for about 7 minutes and 1,300 words. And it was it's all over social media now.
Eric, something else I thought was really interesting that Tony Vitello said, and I'm curious to get your thoughts. He mentioned that, we're playing with house money. We have this chip on our shoulder because we're the number 1 overall seed and nobody expects us to win. So that takes our attention to Omaha, Nebraska. Obviously, Tennessee is looking to become the first number 1 overall national seed to win the whole thing since Miami did it all the way back in 1999. So there's this feeling of the number 1 overall seed curse. How much do you buy of the notion that they're playing with house money, nothing to lose? And is that really something, do you feel like they're carrying into Omaha that is, you don't need fuel to the fire at this point, right? Like if you're not excited, fired up, you don't have a pulse. But are they making that a point of emphasis at all where it's like, hey, like it's us against the world because we're the number 1 overall national seed and nobody expects us to win because of that? Is that something you think they're carrying to the College World Series?
Maybe. I think Tony's comment about that was really, he was just, because everybody was talking about Evansville being, America's sweetheart, the Cinderella at the dance, and Evansville's coaches, their broadcaster, when I interviewed him, I mean, house money kept coming up because it was house money. They'd never been this far, number 1 overall seed. They had a win against the number 1 overall seed in America. That's never happened as a number 4 seed in NCAA history. And I mean, it was kind of like house money. So I think it was kind of more in that reference, like, oh, you want to talk about success? Well, we're not even supposed to win the whole thing. So we're just kind of playing house money. But nonetheless, I think Tennessee in general always has that it's us against the world mindset, kind of going back to the 2022 team. He also had, amongst the 7-minute monologue, he also had a really good line in there talking about the 2022 team because everybody from the outside looks at them as a big failure. Number 1 overall seed, didn't even make it to Omaha. And he's like, yeah, you don't like that team? You don't like the way they play? You don't like the way they talk? Well, they got you talking about college baseball. That's a successful story in my opinion. I thought that was a good line. But you kind of carry that mindset of it's just us. It's just, we're in this trench. We're going to go to war. And it's us against, the entire world. And I think that's kind of carried over the years into 23 and then into this team. There's some guys on this year's team that was a part of that 2022 team. There's very few. Kirby Cannell is one of them that were a part of the 2021 World Series team as well. So it's kind of that mantra that they've had, over the course of the last couple of years. But overall, I don't think that they're worried about some curse. I don't think that they're not using that as motivation whatsoever, but they're just kind of going out there with the confidence, knowing that they're good, knowing that it's not going to be easy because there are other good teams here. But I do believe that they feel as if they play up to their potential, nobody can beat them. And I think that's accurate. And you could probably say that about a couple of teams, right? But, Tennessee's one of those teams with all the arms that it has, the lineup that it has, and the options off the bench to utilize. If Tennessee plays to its potential, I truly don't think that anybody in Omaha can beat them. So I think they know that, and I just think they got to go out there and perform and do that. So, maybe using it as a little motivation, but I wouldn't say, that number 1 overall seed, curse, all that type of stuff. I don't think they're really thinking about that.
Eric, this is a program that was in Omaha just a year ago. Do you feel like having that experience at Charles Schwab Field, do you feel like that's something that can help Tennessee, like the lessons maybe they learned from, going to Omaha last year and years prior under Tony Vitello?
Tony brought up a really good point because he was asked after he was done with the 7-minute monologue. One of the questions was, hey, this team's been to Omaha 3 times in 4 years now, just last year. Do you think that helps? And I thought his answer was really good. He's like, oh, yeah, it definitely helps. Hoover prepared you for Omaha, just the atmosphere and the crowds and just all-day baseball and all that type of stuff. But the schedule is different. And so you play a game, you have an off day. You're going to play a game, you have an off day. It's very different than a weekend series. And he's like, having gone through that last year, kind of knowing what to expect, kind of having a lay of the land, kind of knowing where you're going to go take BP, kind of knowing how the schedule goes on Thursday for media day. It all kind of helps and kind of, settles the nerves a little bit. And there were some guys on the Tennessee roster that weren't here last year, whether it be transfers or freshmen, but they'll follow the lead of the guys who were here. And I thought that was a really, really good answer. It's like, I don't think, the field in general, it's a big field, but Tennessee, played pretty well in Hoover, and that's a big field as well. More so than any of that type of stuff, I just think it was the schedule and kind of the layout of the tournament coming up, about how if you're new and you don't really know how it is, you can get tight and get antsy a little bit. But Tennessee's kind of walked through this the last couple of years. So I thought that was a really, really good answer. So, yeah, I do think that, being here just last year is really going to help in that regard more than anything.
Eric, as we take a look at the bracket, 4 SEC teams, 4 ACC teams, kind of an SEC-ACC challenge in Omaha, but Tennessee side specifically, and not asking you, Eric, obviously for a deep dive, but what I think is so interesting is that, it's kind of like Tennessee is waving to their friends from the SEC on the other side, because in their bracket, they're surrounded by the other ACC teams, North Carolina and Virginia, which will be game 1 on Friday. And then Tennessee takes on Florida State. Just at first glance for you, again, we're not going to get the SEC on SEC matchup when it comes to the Tennessee Volunteers, unless in the finals we get that. Mm-hmm. So just at first glance, thoughts on what Tennessee drew on their side of the bracket with UNC, Virginia, and Florida State.
Yeah, it's kind of unique when you cover one team specifically on the beat. You know the ins and outs of that team, and its opponents, because you've gone through a week of preparing and studying and talk to people, and then you watch them play, and then you see them on TV. So it's like, I know the SEC very, very well. I'm learning, obviously, more and more about Florida State and Virginia and North Carolina, and of course I know that those are really, really good ball clubs, and the ACC is a really, really good conference, especially this year. So, I'm learning more about those teams, but, seeing that Tennessee is in this group and then seeing that Kentucky, Texas A&M, Florida on the other side, I know all about Florida. Florida's giving me Ole Miss 2022 vibes right now in the worst way. And they've got one of the best players in the country. I mean, Christian Moore, one of the best players in the country. Charlie Condon, who didn't make the field, of course, because they lost to NC State last night, one of the best players in the country. Jack Caglione, stud. But Florida's playing so well right now. Only played one game against Texas A&M in the SEC tournament, but saw what that roster looks like. And, of course, the guys that didn't even throw. And Kentucky is just so well-rounded. So, for Tennessee to be away from those teams, you feel really, really good about it. Now, Florida State scares me. Florida State's playing hot. They're a good hitting team. The pitcher that's going to throw on Friday night is so good. I think Florida State just, from the outside looking in right now, would be the biggest challenger for Tennessee, in my opinion. Florida State's really good, and of course, the way North Carolina won in its Super, and Virginia is always in Omaha, it feels like. I mean, it's not going to be an easy game on the docket, but I guess from a guy that covers Tennessee, if you're looking at it from that angle, being away from teams like Florida, Kentucky, and A&M gives you some ease. But, of course, knowing that these other teams up here are not going to make it any easier.
Eric, I know I asked you this question a week ago, but I'll ask it yet again. Player that's an X factor for you in the College World Series, and what's the key, do you feel like, for the Tennessee Volunteers if they're going to make a run in Omaha and potentially find themselves in next weekend's National Championship Series?
Give me Drew Beam. Drew Beam is everybody knows his name. He was SEC Freshman of the Year in 2022. He's been an all-region pitcher. I don't think he's ever missed a start, knock on wood, since he's been at Tennessee. He's phenomenal. His last 3 outings have been anything but. 13 innings combined, his last 3 starts, 14 runs. He is not pitching well right now. For Tennessee to have an extended stay in Omaha, Drew Beam in Game 2, which I'm sure Tony Vitello and Frank Anderson will not mess with their pitching plans because they never do. So I expect Drew Beam to get the ball in Game 2 for Tennessee, whether that's an elimination game or whether that's in the winner's bracket taking on whoever. Drew Beam's got to get back to his vintage self. I wrote it down earlier today. I don't have it in front of me, but I think it was in 3 postseason starts last year, Drew Beam had 17 innings where he gave up 2 runs combined. This year, again, as I mentioned, so far in his last 3 starts, 13 innings, 14 runs. You got to get back to your vintage self. Maybe not even that great, but you got to get back to pitching well with a lead. And Drew's biggest problem here lately has been Tennessee's given him plenty of run support. He's just not been able to hold the lead. And we know he's so talented. He knows this, the SEC. He knows college baseball. He's pitched on this stage before. So I think more so than anybody in the lineup, because it can be a different guy every game for Tennessee in the lineup. Xander Seacrest on the mound's been great. Of course, you need good pitching, but I think Drew Beam's got to get back to his old self and give Tennessee a chance to win the game that he pitches, and then hopefully he pitches again.
Eric Cain of Volquest.com, the On3 Network, host of Locked on Vols, does a great job again covering all things Tennessee Volunteers, and he will be on site in Omaha, Nebraska at the College World Series. Eric, appreciate you taking the time, my friend. Always a pleasure, and enjoy the time in Omaha.
Hey, you as well, man. We'll catch up.